What's going on, Fantasy Chefs? We got your Week 7 early bird looking, coming at ya. Can't believe it is Week 7 already. That is insane. As always, this is not a full-blown lineup show, but just a look-in on the salaries, the matchups, and the potential of players that I like in Draftkings for the week. And as always, we start with quarterbacks. Mr. Jared Goff going up against San Francisco. I really don't like to pay up for Goff in this matchup. I know he has a shaky defensive opponent in San Francisco, but he is on the road. He is probably without Cooper Kupp. I just don't think that Goff is the guy that you really want to pay up for this week, especially when Gurley has been owning the red zone lately. I'm steering away from Goff. A guy that I do like to pay up for is Kirk Cousins this week, going up against the Jets, who have had trouble against quarterbacks, especially this past week with Andrew Luck, who absolutely had nobody to throw the ball to, still came out with 300 plus yards and 4 touchdowns. I do like Cousins. A guy that, if you are interested in getting on the cheap, is Drew Brees. I know he gets the Baltimore matchup here, but look, it's Drew Brees, and if any time is not any, excuse me, if there's any time to get him on the cheap, it is now against Baltimore on the road. I know it's not a good matchup, but we've seen crazier things before. Look at Dak Prescott this past weekend against Jacksonville. Nobody thought that that was possible, and obviously we know Drew Brees is a much better quarterback than Dak Prescott. That's just a for instance of what can happen in the NFL. A lot of people are going to be scared over the matchup, so I think Drew Brees is a real solid play in GPP. Cash lineups, he's iffy. Obviously, there is the possibility that Baltimore does shut New Orleans down, but for 5,700 and as you know, ranked like I think 10th or even lower quarterback, I'm okay with taking a risk on Brees there. Not worried at all. All right, running backs. Gurley, you got to pay up for him every week. He's just too consistent. He's getting too much of a workload. Kamara, temper expectations. He's still in the 20-point range, 20 to 30-point range. But with Mark Ingram back, I don't think he has that 30-plus upside as he did early on in the season. I mean, he can bust 1 or 2 games for the rest of the season out, at 40, but I just don't think that the workload is going to be quite there for him like it was early on this year. Ezekiel Elliott, he is proving to be matchup proof as well. Had a great game against Jacksonville. He did struggle 2 weeks ago against Houston, but oh, lost Mike. That was more so game script. Sorry about that. There was more so game script. I'm not too worried about Elliott going forward. If we look in the mid tiers, I love myself some Sony Michel here at 5,500. This guy is too good right now to pass up for 5,500. Should be owned in all formats, cash and GPP. Keep an eye on Latavius Murray. They finally got the running game going in Minnesota, and Murray had a huge game last week. So keep an eye on Dalvin Cook. He might be out again this past week. He tried to warm up on that bum hamstring before the game started yesterday and suffered a setback. So definitely a key injury to watch there. If we go really cheap options here, a guy that I like is Darren Sproles. Now with Jay Ajayi out and Wendell Smallwood not really doing much last week, I look for Sproles to possibly have a solid game. For $4,000, I think he's worth a roll of the dice in GPP. Peyton Barber is a guy possibly to look at in GPP too. He had a solid game last week, his first good game of the season. Look, he only got the ball 13 times, and he did have a 30-yard, 28-yard run. But I think that Tampa Bay is also one of those teams that has had 0 running games, so a lot of DFS players are going to be staying away. But they do get Cleveland at home, who is ranked 25th against the run on DraftKings, and at $3,800, you're not going to find a starting running back a lot cheaper than that. All right, wide receivers. Starting out, Adam Thielen. I think just like Gurley You've got to pay up for this guy every week. Obviously, you're probably not going to have Gurley and Thielen in the lineup unless you're going with a GPP play. But if you're looking to pay up for receiver, Thielen is the guy. Matchup proof. He has scored close to 30 every single week, and they still have him 1,000 less, 1,200 less make it than Gurley. I think he's right up there in Gurley's range. A couple other guys. I do like Diggs to have a bounce back week against New York. They have a terrible secondary. And Robert Woods. I think Woods is a huge play this week with Cooper Kupp probably out. You saw what he did in the second half there. This guy is super efficient. I watched him a ton of years in Buffalo. He's a great receiver. He just hasn't gotten his chance until now with the Rams. I think Julian Edelman's a good play against Chicago, who struggled against the pass. I think that with the Chicago pass rush, Tom Brady's going to have to get the ball out of his hands quite a bit, and Edelman is that type of receiver. All right, some other lower end receivers. Chris Godwin is very consistent so far this season. He has had double digit fantasy points in all but one of his games this year. His salary is very low, still at 4,600. He's had two out of his last three games, 17 plus points. I think this guy is way underrated, and I think he should be probably owned in all formats. All right, tight ends. Finally, we get some of our big guns back for the main slate. DFS lineups. Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is probably, again, a shoe-in for about 15 points. You've seen what he's done since Wentz has come back. You know, he's a little shaky to start the season with Nick Foles. Now that Wentz is back, this guy is a legit number one tight end. I know a lot of people are making it out to be that Kelsey's number one, but I don't know. These guys are at least 1A, 1B, and the argument can definitely be made that Ertz has the nod over Kelsey. Gronkowski, he's just not doing it this year. He's killing me. I have him in two of my season-long leagues, and he's just not getting the targets. 4 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets. We're used to this guy getting crazy targets, especially in the red zone. He's just not getting the volume that we're used to seeing. Some guys I like on the cheap. Cameron Brate is starting to emerge as a really solid lower end fantasy play, especially at his salary, $3,100. His rapport with Jameis Winston has been really good. Jeff Swaim, I know that he had a rough game this past week with only 4 points, but I do think that this guy is worth a look in GPP games. They drafted him very early in the draft, and I think that he's somebody who is bound to break out sooner or later. So if you're one of those guys that makes like 100 GPP lineups, I'd recommend to throw some Swaim in those. All right, defense. Let's see. Usually what I do for defense, I look at the cheapest defense. I look at their fantasy points per game, and I go by if they're at home. So that brings me to the Jets. However, the Jets face Minnesota. This one stands out for me as a negative. I just don't like the Jets secondary against Minnesota. I think that the receivers have a field day. So I'm staying away from the Jets. A team that is in this range is the Panthers at Philadelphia. The Panthers have been playing some really, really ugly ball. The last 2 weeks they've been playing in the mid-teens to low 20s. I can see them having a slugfest against Philadelphia, who has also been playing some really ugly games. So I wouldn't mind if you grab the Panthers as a cheaper option. Maybe some defenses to pay up for. You've got the Texans at Jacksonville. Jacksonville hasn't been playing very good. You know, I'm a little worried here. Jacksonville is kind of due, but if you look at what they have right now without Leonard Fournette, and it seems like he's probably going to be out again this week. Without Leonard Fournette, they're going to have Bortles throw the ball a lot, and Bortles is not very good when he is rushed. And you guys saw what happened to the Buffalo Bills when the Texans got to them. pick six galore. Nathan Peterman. Obviously, Bortles is a better quarterback, but I do like the Texans' ability to get to Bortles and wreak some havoc. All right, guys, that is it for me. The early bird look-in is finished. And as always, if you want the full lineup, go over to fantasychef.net. We've got the full-blown lineup that I set every week for both FanDuel and DraftKings. And also, starting this week, we've got the NBA tipping off. So you get the NFL, the NBA, and the UFC for one price, $4.99 a month. It's an insane value. We do have a premium membership that nets you some extra lineups. That is $9.99. It also nets you a fantasy consultation one time per month where we will break down your season-long league with you, give you tips, tricks, strategies, ads, drops, the whole thing. We'll sit down with you and go over your personal league. If you don't play season long, we can talk about DFS strategy, anything that you guys want. It is over at fantasychef.net to sign up. Hope that you guys have a good week and enjoy week 7 of the NFL.